Hello, my name is Craig Dionne. The title of my talk is Recapitulation in Hamlet, Shakespeare's Environmental Uncanny. For years I've been thinking about how one might read deep history in the literary text, but where to find it. I've been interested in showing how a greater appreciation of the shared behavioral mechanisms of human memory and perception work to foster a green humanities. Knowledge of evolution works against the grain of human exceptionalism by telling the story of how human intellection and culture, language, music, art, that which seemingly defines us as separate from and above other species, are motored by deeply ingrained cognitive processes that make us more kin and not so different in kind to other life forms. We have learned to shy away from the essentialist grain of biological discourses that speak of human behaviors in the context of biological determinism, selection pressures, and genetic codes. We fear that our very words and categories may accidentally conjure up the worst forms of prejudice, as our healthy skepticism for superstitions and animism likewise pushes us away from the image of an ingrained actant and bias behind the mental screen of consciousness. But if eco-critical literary humanists imagine being at one with environmental vitalism, we should not neglect the theories of evolution that help us reflect on the very real connections between the human brain and shared co-evolved cognitive platforms of the animal kingdom. A green literary humanism must retool its reading of literature as a lesson in the appreciation of all life. This is the importance of the eco-critical argument that human exceptionalism is the very ideology that imperils our planet. In the following, I want to explore how Shakespeare's Hamlet plays out theories of recapitulation. This is a small part of my Paleo Hamlet project, which builds on a few essays I have published. I apologize to those familiar with my work. As this project develops, as slow as the melting glacier, you might say, I find myself going back to previous ideas and reworking them like Penelope unraveling the earlier patterns to start anew. Lately, I've become interested in the old handsaw of evolutionary theory, that during the course of one's life, from the embryo through to a maturity, an individual life form lives out the phylogenetic history of its species, or, as the saying goes, ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. In his definitive genealogy, Ontogeny and Phylogeny, Stephen Gould describes how generations of intellectuals in the late 19th and early 20th century were lured by the theory of recapitulation. The image of the human embryo having fish-like slits appeared to recapitulate or tell again the whole evolutionary history of our life on the planet. From embryonic cell division, the morphologies of the previous life forms from amoeba to life as fish, and then to crawling mammal, to finally a walking erect primate. It might seem forced to read Hamlet's story as a reflection of phylogeny. We have a few interpretations of the play from the 1990s literary Darwinism that see him working against selection pressures and modeling forms of adaptation, etc. There is a long tradition, however, of accounting for the play as one about Hamlet's special language use. There are strong parallels to this idea of recapitulation. The character of Hamlet is consistently addressed as new or different from other forms of character representation. His interiority seems born on the shore of literary history, a new species of characterization whose wordplay and ad hoc insertions stand on the scaffold of older generic forms only to shed the skin of Senecan tragic heroism and Renaissance rhetorical training and bristle in the sunlight of mental spontaneity. And rumors of an Hamlet might figure here as the whispered lost trace, the as yet discovered Cambrian shale of the earlier biological form only lived in its later expression. In Ontogeny and Phylogeny, Gould provides a history of the key biologists and the specific debates that shape the argument about recapitulation. Chapter 5 is the chapter for literary humanists. He explains that recapitulation as such is an illusion. One phyla's development is not mirrored in another. But nonetheless, Gould proposes one aspect of the recapitulation debate that has value. The debate called attention to the relative speed or pace of ontogeny. That is, some species vary the speed of development depending on their environmental conditions. Famous examples include salamanders. Gould explains, quote, "The slowdown of our development does not guarantee that we will retain juvenile proportions as adults, but does provide a mechanism for the easy retention of any juvenile feature that suits the adult lifestyle of descendants. In fact, juvenile features are a storehouse of potential adaptations for descendants, and they can be utilized easily if the development is strongly retarded in time." We're told humans exhibit several signs of neoteny. Neoteny. Consider the unique development of the human foot with its aligned big toe, an example viewed as neoteny if considered as the retention of a less mature or embryonic foot structure compared to other primates. Humans are the only species on the planet that spend 30% of its life growing up, developing, basking in its delayed maturity. By slowing down the development of the human child's brain growth, our evolution allowed for the development of cognitive processes enabled by the extended growth of the primate cortex. This idea is called neoteny, literally holding youth. The idea of neoteny would not shock the 16th century humanist grammar teachers, as they were all keen observers of the peculiar nature exhibited by the child's brain, in particular the plasticity of memory. Consider how, in his The Schoolmaster, Roger Ascham in 1570 defined the child's memory as curiously malleable. This is a quote, "And wit in children by nature, namely memory, the only key and keeper of all learning, is readiest to receive and surest to keep any manner of thing that is learned in youth. Every man sees, as I said before, new wax is best for printing, new clay fittest for working, new shorn wool aptest for soon and surest dyeing, new fresh flesh for good and durable salting. And this similitude is not ruse, nor borrowed of the larder house, but out of his schoolhouse, of whom the wittiest in England need not be ashamed to learn." Unquote. Readiest to receive and surest to keep any manner of thing. A child's memory is rendered through Ascham's domestic conceits. It's like new dyed shorn wool, stamped new clay, fresh flesh, durable for salting, etc. All of these images are of pressed or stamped objects, malleable and open to tactile impressions, metaphors for automatic retention. As if intuiting the very idea of neoteny, the grammar teachers of the day imagine what we call priming as an active mechanical process that reproduces copies of the world impressed in the larder house of the mind. We note Ascham's metaphor of the larder house is close to Gould's idea of storehouse. The process of retarding development, stretching out the growth to maturity, ensures that the child has years for its brain to absorb its environment. If we were to imagine a literary character who symbolizes neoteny, might it be our reluctant revenge hero, the student man? Our 30-year-old tragic hero appears as a child in adult's clothing, lost in wonder, symbolizing in the context of the play's familiar hallways something like a Renaissance literary equivalent to neoteny. And those who have taught the play know it is impossible to ignore he's a 30-year-old student. Treated as an adolescent, even though he's more than middle-aged. Like Hamlet's age lost in the bokeh, the camera's soft focus of the background, the play is nothing but scaffolded moments of discursive recapitulation, scenes where characters tell again a story of a preceding mainstream moment, speeches that hold the truth of the present to be found in the past. Here is a speech about the ghost I last encountered. Here, the murder by your uncle. Here is a goodbye speech composed of previously inscribed saws and proverbs, and a remembered oration by an actor to mirror the idea of revenge as told by Player 2, the traveling jukebox of stored plays. It is also a play that intuits the idea that character might be attributed to inheritance. Is this Shakespeare's only inquiry into the idea that a child's personality is inherited through ancestors in such a dissociative way? A quick rundown to think this through. All other parents in Shakespeare have children of iteration whose manners seem to echo or amplify. Bolingbroke's knee-bending performance anticipates his son Harry, and likewise with Volumnia, whose resolve is dilated in Coriolanus. Hermione seems mirrored in Perdita. And here, in Hamlet, the father Polonius's quizzical humanist training prefigures his children's odd affective manners and traumatic tics, as if the trauma of rhetoric is borne witness to a displaced affectation. Laertes' vengeance seems giant-like. He speaks the phrase of sorrow and is merely a face without a heart, while Ophelia's trauma-bonded grief seems to express itself in the patterns of involuntary speech, haunting expressions of child's song. I want to come back to this in a second. Neoteny is hidden in plain sight. The play reads like a museum to the child, as it appears to the Renaissance humanist schoolmaster. The child is stamped language sponges from the larder house of invention. The play Hamlet can be read as a densely meta response to children's theater. The players in Act 2 wander into its narrative center, chased from London by the Children's of St. Paul's, one of children's acting companies competing for playgoers in Shakespeare's time. Hamlet's stage door opens onto the evolutionary metatext, the Parnassus plays, a satirical lament of the limitations of classical language training and its emphasis on the cult of emulation. Did Shakespeare have in mind the play Pilgrimage to Parnassus, performed in London by the Boys' Company from St. John's between 1598 and 1602? This mock morality play satirizes the humanist enterprise, offering words of warning. The character Ingenioso turns to the fellow student Philomusus, who has recently rejoined his mission to climb the allegorical hill of hard study through the trivium, and warns of the life of poverty awaiting him at the top of the mountain. Alas, Apollo is bankrupt. There is nothing but silver words and golden phrases for a man. Ingenioso imagines the fruitless journey in key terms. The result of your hard labor will be to play out the ritual of reacting from the nonsense book Puerile's Confabulations to a company of 7-year-old apes. To get to Parnassus, a mountain in the early modern imaginary that symbolized the magnificence of the mythic gods, one trudged up the footpath through emulation. Aren't Hamlet's patronized players in Elsinore refugees from the popularity of London's children's theater? Haven't they been run out of town by precisely this kind of neotenous man-child? Do the boys carry it away? Hamlet asks, surprised at the gossip. Hamlet's mind immediately moves to the double image of his father and Claudius to make a point of theater's fickle crowd, but the image is visited by a flash of linked associations. Miniature portraits whose likeness troubles the face of the real sovereign subject. Children wearing rapiers but afraid of goose quills, Rosencrantz quips. Hamlet thinks through a series of comparisons, children writing, children growing up to become common players, exclaiming against succession, the fickle taste of mimics in the court. A 30-year-old boy, a little picture of the king. Is it not very strange for mine uncle is king of Denmark, and those that would make mouths at him while my father lived, give 20, 40, 50, 100 ducats apiece for his picture in little. Sblood, there is something in this more than natural if philosophy could find it out. Hamlet's odd aside about the fickle followers of Claudius's court. The line has an eerie quality of the passing thought, an idea lost in its recollection. The Parnassus plays give voice to the malaise of overeducated, literate 20-somethings who may not be able to make a living in London, but can turn a poetic phrase through prime tropic reflexes, voice countless Latin declensions, spout the vocative case in their sleep, hide under their illusions and study their pain. Shakespeare's Hamlet shares the same assessment of humanist language training. The play's concern for speaking out of rote memory frames the backdrop of Claudius's court in Elsinore, where the Osrics of the world speak volumes of fond and winnowed opinions. The repetition of priming, the stamping of memory through routine, leaves its mark on Laertes and Ophelia, whose manifest affective gestures of grief speak the latent story of humanist training. These few precepts in thy memory see thou character, Polonius says to Laertes, when he may never see his son again. If Hamlet's breezy candor speaks to the freedom from rhetorical training, Laertes and Ophelia give us its prison house. For this reason, it is deeply bitter or mordant, even, that Shakespeare returns to priming as something that regenerates or revitalizes. In one of Shakespeare's more ironic narrative resolutions, at that moment Hamlet meets with Gertrude to restore her virtue, the infamous closet scene recognized by Janet Edelman as the real direction of Hamlet's twisted convictions in the revenge plot. The hero proposes a strategy not of dissimulation, but of emulation, a rehearsed set of effective postures his mother must imitate to prepare for her encounter with Claudius. Assume a virtue, if you have it not. Here, copy this. His advice to his mother is predicated on the very idea of priming through rote habit, the humanist dream of constituting the child subject through mindless repetition. Lean into your species adaptive neoteny, our phylogenetic programming. Routine in action not only mirrors, but produces more than the sum of its arithmetic. Nature is just so much salted flesh out of the slaughterhouse of conditioned behavior, a livery aptly put on, a kind of easiness to the next abstinence, the next more easy. In closing, let me add that a cognitive ethological approach to literature asks, what is the evolutionary basis of invention? How does our long history as a species shape the way mimetic practices, mirroring the gestures of others, inspire a different appreciation of human invention in the web of life? A post-human politics engages in the slow-burning activism of exposing Shakespeare's aesthetics not as common to his era or his generation, but rather common to a larger environmental whole as a shared attribute of a broader spectrum of the animal kingdom. Learning to appreciate the environmental uncanny of Shakespeare's work deepens our appreciation of the serendipity and wonder of all life. Let me finish by saying if you are listening to this archived recording on the Earth Shakes website and have questions or comments, please feel free to email me. It has been an honor to speak for Globe for Globe. Thank you.